Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. Today, I'm absolutely fizzing with excitement to welcome Vivian and Howard, co-founders of Little Moons, to the podcast. Little Moons make deliciously, highly addictive mochi ice cream balls. I mean, last night I actually sat and devoured a packet of your Belgian chocolate ice cream balls, which are absolutely insane. They founded the business back in 2010, originally supplying Japanese and Asian restaurants across London. But since then, they've now gone on to build a huge retail brand, listings in Tesco, Waitrose, Asda, Morrison's, Ocado, Deliveroo, Uber Eats. I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this has seen the roaring success of their TikTok campaign, which really did go berserk. So guys, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. We listen to all your podcasts.
Oh, that's kind. So guys, where I want to start, I was doing a bit of research before this, is actually I want to talk about you as little kids before Little Moons, I suppose. And for listeners, Viv and Howard and I, we met on a young foodie sales course a couple of years ago. And I remember vividly your mum being there. And I was like, oh, there's something in this. Like the mum's so involved in the business. And I thought it's so sweet, and it's so interesting. So from what I've learned from doing research is you guys grew up, or your mum had a bakery in London. You guys spent a lot of time there. I'd love to know kind of what was a typical day for Viv and Howard in that bakery? Like where was it, and kind of what sort of things was your mum selling or dad selling?
Just firstly about that young foodies course. Our dad had just recently passed away, which is why we kind of didn't want to leave our mum, so she came with us because it was a really nice location, right? It was in a nice country house, and we brought our dog as well. So we are quite family orientated.
Yeah, well, that's what I remember thinking, and I was like, that was exactly what I gathered. But it'd be amazing to know, yeah, as I said, like what was it like growing up in that bakery?
Yeah, I guess just starting off, like we saw the whole evolution of our parents' business, which actually began on the kitchen table, literally. So while my dad had a full-time job, my mum and dad noticed like a gap in the market where the foods that they enjoyed when they were growing up in Malaysia, they weren't available in the UK, or the ones that they tried by the time they'd been imported all the way from Asia just didn't taste good enough. So they started making it literally from the home kitchen and supplying it to stores in Chinatown. And it kind of grew from there, and we saw them open like their first factory up, and then kind of their second factory. And so, you know, we were there during the whole time. You know, I think I remember helping tile the second factory. So yeah, I guess it wasn't always a factory, basically.
So yeah, because my mum actually started the bakery. This is how original girl power she is. So she was a career woman, and she had her kids, and she had us, and she couldn't find work really, and to take care of two kids. It was so much harder in the early 80s. There weren't any sort of like laws like there are now to protect women, and so she thought, you know what, I'm just going to make a bit of spare cash by making these cakes at home. So she started the business in her own kitchen and sort of built it from there. And she always said to me, Vivian, as a woman, it's really important that you think about starting your own business so you're in control of your own time, because she saw the difficulty that she had as a mother needing to work, and how the timings don't work, how difficult childcare is. So she always made me mindful of that. She's still very much my mentor.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is like, what's the impact she has on Little Moons today? Like, what kind of advice has she instilled that you think you implement daily at Little Moons?
I think what her and my dad passed on to Howard and I is just having a really good respect for quality of product. Like, don't just put out anything out there. It's like, you know, you're presenting it, it's you presenting yourself to the world. It's got to be the best that you possibly can make. So we've always focused on quality of product, whichever flavor, whether it's vegan or not vegan. We wanted to make sure that it was really delicious and something that we can be really proud of.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing the joy and satisfaction they got from hearing like glowing reviews from people in the community, and I think that really motivated them and was a real source of pride for them. And so that's something that's I've always kind of brought back to Little Moons. We always get a huge kind of sense of pride when you hear people enjoying our products. So I think we've got that from them. The other thing I think is also just their insane work ethic. They used to sort of get up at 6 a.m. in the morning and be making products, doing deliveries, writing out invoices by hand because you didn't really have computers back then. It's just absolutely insane. And so that's one of the takeaways. But then the other thing is also just learning the importance of, in order to grow, sort of hiring good people. And I think that's one of the things that held our family's business back, is that was such a family endeavor. There was only so much you could do. And I saw that actually, they were doing everything. And I think when we started Little Moons, we had the ethos from the beginning that, you know, we needed to be more open and external and like get great people involved in the company.
No, that's so interesting. So on just to kind of go back, so your parents were selling, what product were they actually selling to? It was cakes into restaurants? What was
it was cake. It was like traditional Malaysian cakes. So they were like pandang chiffon cakes, which is a sponge cake in different flavors. They did it in orange and banana flavor. Then they did all these sorts of puff pastries that I'll say it's called wife biscuit. Sounds strange, but it's made with a winter melon with sugar. So it's very specific to the East Asian community. But those are the stalls that they were selling to. So all the little stores you see in Chinatown, in Manchester, Birmingham, London's Chinatown, those were their customers. And then the big wing yips, lung fungs, string advertising. You know, all the big Chinese supermarkets that they have outside of, outside of big cities like London, Birmingham, Manchester's got them. Those places. That's where my parents sold their goods to.
And whereabouts in London was their like an original factory?
In Wembley.
Okay, so
really close to where we grew up. Yeah, when they finally moved out the family kitchen, they found a little industrial unit really close to home, so mum could easily pop back to see us as kids, pick us up from school. So her commute was convenient. So that's how we ended up in the sort of like North London area. Yeah.
Well, because I remember I listened to the about what you just said there, both of you, about their insane work ethic, and also I suppose it's the fact that it was in Wembley as well. But I remember listening to a Claudia Winkleman podcast about both of you guys packing boxes at 4 a.m. in the morning, and I kept thinking when you guys said that, I was like, where does that drive come from, and that ability to graft, which I think anyone listening to that, if you want to do anything, you've got to graft. But it's so interesting because I thought how your mum's kind of been key in that. And is she involved at all now, or is it she's still just sort of the mama figure of everything?
She's just our mum. Obviously, we tell her about what's going on with the business, but the business is sort of growing so much larger than her bakery. But you know, the business ethos is still there, and so we always still discuss what's going on in the business. She finds it super interesting, but she is fully retired.
I don't blame her after all that.
We still run her bakery for her as well.
Yeah, in the early days of the business, we were still operating at the same factory that made my parents' business's products. And so she'd pop in and she would like cook lunch for us, and she'd still be involved in the day-to-day. Notice like little things going on, like, hey guys, the staff aren't like, turning off the lights and it's wasting electricity. And we're just like, Mom, we have so much bigger stuff to worry about, but like, thanks for your input. But then other times she also did add value. I mean, I think for the first few years we were kind of faffing around, like hypothecating about branding and what to call ourselves. And I think 2 years into the journey, she's like, I think you guys need to start focusing on sales now, guys. We're like, yeah, you might have a point, Mum.
No, but it just gives you that reality check, which, because sometimes I think you can get so stressed at all these, or at least I know I do with Money Life, with all these, you can overthink everything of how do we create this one page, or is there too much on it? And I think what your mum said there is like, just switch the lights off is brilliant. It's like, actually just relax for a sec and like, let's get the basics right. Because I think within our worlds and our spheres, especially with what you guys are creating, you can get so carried away with the creative and the kind of the marketing side of things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, perfecting your packaging, the first iteration. But I heard someone say, was it someone from Huel, he said, if you're happy with your packaging the first time round, then you've launched your product too late or something. Like, you just get so into the minutiae, and it's not just launch it. It's good enough, minimum viable product, and go for it.
Absolutely. So kind of building on like your, I suppose, on your mum, is I want to explore you guys as brother and sister, both, I suppose, professionally and personally, because I think it's really interesting for listeners who are in well, either working with family members or in a co-founding partnership, because you've got to get those things, you know, working super well. Now, obviously you guys were packing boxes at 4 a.m. You've got this this work ethic. Have there been, and apologies if this is getting gory here, but have there been any like potential bust ups between you guys? Because I think it would help listeners in terms of how to deal with that potential conflict when you've both got strong, fiery characters in a business.
I think we've learned so much about working together, and I think in the early days that there weren't like bust ups, but we definitely had like challenges with working with each other, in terms of sometimes the way that I think about things very different to where Howard's coming at it from. But I think what's the most important thing is just to have mutual respect all the way through. Like, if you speak to each other respectfully, then you know, you're not going to have a bust up as such. And so I think the turning point for us was doing a personality test, the colours. And so when we got the results, we were polar opposites. Like, we couldn't be more polar opposite in terms of our personalities and the way that we think about things. And that made us really appreciate why the other sort of takes so long to make a decision, why I kind of just want to do things, and Howard thinks I'm not thinking about it enough, because that's the way we think. And I think that was actually the beauty of our relationship, whereby we came at things from such a different angle, but we appreciated that, and you just find a way to move forward. And I think that's why we've been so successful, because we're so different, so we try and cover all bases. What's your answer, Howard? Is it similar, right?
I think that one of the kind of sort of standard bits of business advice is pick a partner that has like a different skill set to you and bring something different to the table. And obviously, as brothers and sisters, we weren't thinking that way when we started the business together, but it turns out to be a lucky coincidence that we do actually approach problems from a completely different way. But then we talk it through, and we don't actually often have real challenges of like who's right. We sort of see who can come up with the best logic or reasoning. But in terms of just have there been any bust ups, I think in the early days of the relationship, we were living and working together, and we were going through some really stressful times, and we'd get home, and the last thing we'd want to do is kind of, if you spent more time together, you'd end up talking about the business, which is the last thing you want. So you just go home and like close your door and like stay in your room. I think, but as the business grew, I think having other members of the senior leadership team to just sort of, when it's just two of you and you're making all the calls and trying to figure out everything for yourself, it can be quite stressful because sometimes you just don't have the answer. But I think having a team around you, and also when we had an external advisor to just help mediate and help us come to decisions, I think that was a real big help as well.
No, that's so fascinating, because I suppose where I'm going with this is that I think we've got it in Moneylife. You've got different personalities, and I think you absolutely need that. You need kind of cognitive dissonance, do you know what I mean, to create really great outcomes. But I think within that there can sometimes be paralysis analysis by decision. So for example, say Howard, you're being super analytical about X, and then Viv, you're trying to, let's just get this done, bosh. I think when that happens, it's getting to a decision can be quite hard, and with everything we're doing in these worlds, like we've got to move fast. So could you speak to like how you said you got a strategic advisor, like how does he mediate and stop this kind of, maybe bust up was the wrong word, I mean potentially slowing down decisions when you've got to move fast? Because if you're in this camp, Howard, and you're in this camp, Viv, that can be sometimes an interesting tension.
Yeah,
he was not a strategic advisor. He was our non-executive director. And so we talk about the business problem together. And so because Howard respects Mark, as do I, his opinion, so often we would discuss it, and it become clear what really would be the right thing to do. And you just check it, you just do the risks and analysis, and it sort of just comes out really what the best course of action should be.
And I've also learned a bit about myself as well, because I used to try and be a bit of a perfectionist and take way too long to make a decision. And so the whole kind of 80-20 rule really kind of something I latched onto, and just think, look, you have to just launch quickly. And if it's kind of almost good enough, just go with it. And there's always, you know, an opportunity to reiterate or iterate it in the future. And so I try and, you know, I've now changed the way I make decisions from the early stages of the business. I'm just like, cool, it's good enough. And is it that big a deal anyway? Because if it's just a one pager going out to sort of some of your customers, you're like, okay, it's fine. I can spot some things I would improve, but you know what? It's fine.
Yeah, I love that.
I feel like I've been on a journey of learning about myself as the business grows as well. And you just have to, as you sort of manage more people and sort of lead a larger business, you do need to like reassess how you handle things and the way that you look at things as well. So it's definitely been a journey for the both of us.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask next, actually, is like how, because it's scaled so much. Like, how many employees do you have now? It's over 300. Yeah, that's absolutely mental. So how has the, I suppose, the Howard and the Viv changed from when it was just you two, like making it in the kitchen, living together? How's your skill set or personality changed now you're managing 300 people? Because I think for me personally, I'd be like a completely different version of myself. I think it'd be quite interesting to explore that.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be all about the doing and getting involved with things, and I had to make a transition where you learn to let go, and you stop doing things kind of yourself, but you're trying to get the best out of your team to let them do it. And you kind of need to know it's a fine balance between empowering your team to get on with things, or when you have a strong opinion about the way something should be done and that's not happening, like when to step in and sort of picking your battles. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I've been trying to learn, in terms of doing things yourself versus sort of empowering your team to do them.
And Howard and I have always like wanted to, and not afraid of employing people that are way smarter than us, who really know their subject. So when we hired our ops director, he obviously knows how to run the factory way better than I do. And so I'm very happy to sit back, listen and learn and watch. And so that's why we have empowered our team, because we've just hired good people and we've got to make sure that they trust them to get on with it. And then it just frees up our time to look at other things, sort of think bigger picture, more strategically, because if you're leading the business, you've got to see the woods for the trees. And we were so used to doing everything. We were the little trees, we were every tree. So it was good to be able to step back.
Absolutely. And is there like a specific example? Because I think what you've said there, it is so hard. You've got to have that balance of empowering people, let them get on, but at the same time, I think no one knows the brand as well as you guys do. So there's that moment of having to jump in. Is there an example where you have jumped in, either Howard or Viv, and it has had like a big shift in the business, like with the decision? I guess
one of the big strategic decisions we had to make and show leadership in is just that decision to commit to buying a new factory. Like none of the SLT can make that decision or that call. We can all discuss it. Sales are going up. Looks like we need it. Finances, you know, we could get the money together to do it, but to actually make the decision and do it, it's down to Howard and I. And so that was something, I guess, that really supercharged the business, because we made that decision a year before we moved in. So we moved in January 2020, 2 months later, lockdown happened. So that was another stress, because we've got this massive factory, a huge rent to pay, and the world has collapsed around us. So that was stressful, but that was a really pivotal point in the business, because had we not moved into a larger factory, we wouldn't have been able to even come close to meeting the demand that happened a year later, or as the business grew actually in 2020 when we reopened. Because I remember, so I guess that was quite pivotal.
I think that's another example. Sorry, I think that's another example of when Viv and I approached the problem from really different ways, because I'm a bit more analytical. I like a bit more certainty on this. And this new factory that we're investing in was such a huge decision for us. It was a massive step up for us. The rent and rates alone would just absorb all of our kind of cash. And we decided to go ahead with it because we had a bit of confidence. But then Brexit basically got confirmed as happening. And because so much of our sales went to Europe, I suddenly got really like cold feet and we're like, oh my God, if we can't sell to our European customers, we're pretty like screwed. And so I was like, can we get out of this? This is going to be like a huge long-term commitment. was panicking. And then Viv was kind of a lot more, you know, we were all worried. We debated it a lot at kind of board meetings. And then Viv just took the decision and that I've got a gut feel for this. We need to do this. Let's just go for it. And we were just like, okay, let's do it. And if we hadn't made that decision, I think that we probably would have just collapsed this year with all the demand. Things just wouldn't have been able to continue in our old production facility. So it was such an epic kind of sliding doors decision. But yeah, I think that's an example of where, you know, different ways of looking at things can sort of be useful.
And I'm a massive believer in following your gut. Actually, I think there's something, I don't know, I do a lot of meditation. I think the gut can give you answers when with something about analytics that sometimes can't. Like, what was your gut in that instance saying, Viv? Because I remember you saying, Howard, to me, like, you either had a factory that was way too big or way too small, so you're kind of in this no man's land. But what was your gut saying, Viv? Was it being intrigued?
I just thought, what would happen if we didn't have it? Like, what would we lose? We've got so much to play for. And I know Brexit was there, but you'd find a way. It's not just us, it's a whole country. So if other industries and other businesses find a way through the quote, we didn't know there could be quote, there would have been there could potentially have been tariffs. We knew there was going to be customs documents. Luckily, they got a deal, so there was no tariffs, but we still had the customs documents to get through. And I just thought that we should be able to find a way. Like, it has to, like, business just can't stop. And I figured we would be able to limp along and just maybe break even paying the rent of this big factory, even though we could still fulfill orders from our smaller factory. And we were using it as the warehouse, any part of it for the warehouse. I just thought, you've got to go for it. You've got to back yourself. I just have faith in the team. We just had to do it. And so that was where, you know, I managed to convince Howard, and we were just like, right, let's do it.
I love it. And when obviously all the what was to come, the TikTok success, everything, it without that, you know, bold move, it could have gone very, very differently. Cool. So one question and one theme that every guest, Charlie Bigg and Mark Palmer, has always said is, they say the hardest thing for any food and drink brand is getting to that first sort of 0 to 1 million retail sales or sales. And I think lots of listeners are in that stage where they're in that kind of in the weeds, a bit like when you were saying just then about being in the trees, or you can't see the woods from the trees. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on what was the hardest unforeseen challenges as you went from almost 0 to 1, that could unlock quite interesting insights for listeners.
I think for us personally, because we were doing production ourselves, which is quite a rare decision for a lot of brands, but for those that are doing it, I think it can take up so much of your headspace that we felt like we were spending our first couple of years just almost entirely in a factory thinking about production. And I used to meet up with other brands every now and again because we were in an industrial estate in Wembley. And they were kind of in the thick of things in central London, meeting other brands, knowing what's going on, networking, and just focusing on sales and marketing. So the first years were so slow because we felt like all of our resources and headspace were spent just figuring out how to produce this, and also dealing with machine failures and, you know, all sorts of issues that you can't even imagine. I think, yeah, that was one of the most difficult parts of the early stages.
It's not being able to see the wood from the trees in terms of like constantly just being focused on production.
I guess so. I think it was just that it took up 90% of your headspace was the production side of things, and you could only spend 10% thinking about kind of doing the sales and marketing side of things.
I see.
Do you agree with?
I think like the hardest thing getting from 0 to 1 million turnover, it just felt like one great hustle. Like, you get lots of small gains for us. I think we didn't go straight into retail, so, you know, it wasn't like to get to that 1 million we got one client that got it. So it was a hustle of lots of different clients, and then I guess, like Howard said, behind the scene hustle of making sure that our manufacturing processes were working for us, because we were, you know, we're not experienced. We didn't have a factory manager to teach us how, or an engineer of how to set up the factory. It just felt like one big hustle. But I just think sometimes it's hard to stick to your strategic vision because you don't know everything's going to go there. So I remember just saying yes to a lot of sales to a few restaurants outside of London, and it was difficult because it was then hard to get it there, but you kind of can't turn down business at that time because you want everything. And so as we grew, it got harder to service them, but I was kind of glad, you can't foresee that. So I guess my advice would just be, just go with the hustle, have that foresight, have that strategic vision, but you do need to pivot and be quite flexible with how to get there, because it's never a straight line. It's always a wiggle, right, to get
I love that
goal.
And we pivoted quite a few times. I mean, it's so long ago now you can't always remember it, but there were so many sort of decisions we had to make quite quickly in the early days. I think we always wanted to be a grocery brand in supermarkets, but when we first launched, we really quickly realized that seemed like a bit too early or not possible at that time. And that's why we started to supply food service or restaurants. We made that decision. And actually, when we first launched, we were also inspired by Goo, and we saw the success that they had in sort of the chilled space, the chilled desserts. And so our initial idea was actually to launch our kind of chocolate mochi, which was a chilled kind of chocolate ganache product. And so we thought that was what would be kind of our main hero SKU. And then we switched to ice cream pretty soon after that.
And then went through 2 iterations of branding. So we branded it under a different name, even though for the chilled product that Howard was mentioning. And then people started saying, but I really like the name Little Moons. It's much cuter than the other name that we were using. And so we just thought, we just decided to kill the other brand and just call everything under Little Moons. So it's just, we've made big expensive mistakes along the way, but sometimes you just got to cut your losses and say, let's just focus on this one brand.
And what was the other brand's name, if I'm allowed to ask?
Suki Mochi.
And was those the ones that as you say, it's the ganache. It's like it's in the Waitrose, like sushi. I can't say my sushi.
Yes.
Sushi section. Yeah. Okay. Cause that was weird. Cause I remember it did just pop up as Little Moons. I was like, oh, if you guys have gone in and replaced that brand. I was like, but it was actually your brand all along. That's so interesting.
Yeah, that was in Selfridges. I think we only ever launched Suki in Selfridges, and then we just thought,
right.
We're just going to call it on like Little Moons. And the only reason why we did it, we thought that the consumers would get really confused between a frozen mochi and a chilled, and then they might buy it from the freezer and then think that it's supposed to go in the fridge and put it in the fridge. You know how you overthink some things.
Oh, God,
you overthink things, and then you miss the big picture that like managing 2 brands would have just been a complete nightmare. So we made a really painful decision to cut a brand that we'd just spent thousands and thousands of pounds creating. Yeah. But after we created it, we realized it kind of looked like a Harrods / Selfridges product. It was too premium to want to eat every day. And so we just had to sort of like take the painful decision to sort of end that brand.
Yeah.
No, I suppose we've done that as well. Like we created for lunch in 2019, we had our hearts and minds on creating these peanut butter cups. Again, just complete lack of focus. Like we hadn't even got our main SKUs into like any like significant distribution. We were already like tinkering with NPD, and then we're like, you got to kill those off. And it's painful because I was eating thinking that this is the best thing in the world. But I think there's this, we've discussed it with other guests before, is this balance with pivoting and tinkering, but also knowing when to say no to things. And that's a really hard thing, like being able to, as you say, kill off this other brand and put it under Little Moons.
I think that's so true. I think when I look at lots of brands, including ourselves on the early journey, there's so many, as an entrepreneur, you kind of want to go in all directions, and you just like the idea of something new and different. So I think we've explored opening up our own bakery or mochi store or mochi and ice cream store, and so many different ideas, which in hindsight would have been the completely wrong thing to do or would have like led to too much distraction. So I think a lot of other businesses I see also have that, like they're kind of just launching their first product and then they're already thinking about product 2 and 3, and it's kind of, you kind of need a bit of focus.
And so just kind of put some color to this. So I didn't realize that it's really interesting. I didn't realize you'd always had the goal of setting up like a retail focused brand. I thought so one of my questions was going to be like, what was the moment in time when you're like, okay, now's the right time to go into retail? Because you started in 2010, you didn't go into retail till, was it 2015?
Yeah. we were getting loads of emails from people who had eaten it in restaurants, and somehow there was one story about a chap had jumped into the bins of Yo Sushi to find out who manufactured it. Like, no word of a lie, I've got the email, we couldn't believe it, you can't make it up. And he just said, look, I want to buy it directly from you because Yo Sushi, I keep going to Yo Sushi to buy it and I'm sure I could get it cheaper from you. And so people started to know that Little Moons made all these mochis for these restaurants. And so we just thought, now they're recognizing the name, maybe we'll try and approach Whole Foods, which is what we did. And we thought, we'll give it a go. We've been told that everyone gets knocked back from Whole Foods. If you even hear back from them, they're a nightmare to get hold of. And so we sent the buyer, Daniel back then, an email and said, hi, big spiel, we're Little Moons, this is about us, these are our flavors, and not expecting to hear back from him. And I kind of want to say, like 20 minutes or maybe 5 minutes later, Howard, he writes back, email pinged into our inbox and it said, you had me at mochi. And that was kind of the start of our journey in retail. We became their best-selling ice cream when we launched, and for I want to say many months, if not a year. And then with them, we then also launched our pick and mix, which was really great for our profile and customer engagement and stuff. So that.
And no. So I mean, it's basically a complete opposite way of how we got into Whole Foods. It took about 5 gazillion emails, like going to the head office with all sorts of like homemade creations. But I do think, if you've been grafting, the serendipitous moments do come along. And I think when he says, when you've got people clamoring in the bins of Yo Sushi, like you probably know that you're onto something. But did you guys have like because the packaging now is delightful, but was it back then, because it was still food service, was it not white label going into food service? Like, how did you create something that was ready to look really good on shelf when Whole Foods came calling?
We'd already been to a branding agency to help us with that process. So it wasn't perfect, that packaging. If you do see it, I don't have any on me actually, but it'd be great to show everyone just how our brand has evolved. It certainly wasn't how it looks now. And this is one of the things that Howard and I were saying, like, we knew it wasn't perfect, but you just got to seize the moment and go for it and then use the time. And then it was so successful that we thought, right, we have more confidence to then spend more money on branding to try and improve, perfect the look and feel of the brand on shelf. Yeah. And
I suppose, because 2015, like now, obviously post TikTok, like everyone knows what mochi is. But I think back then, from at least in my eyes, it must have been hard to educate the consumer on what it was, especially if, like, obviously if they're doing a demonstration at Whole Foods and they can literally try it. How have you sort of navigated those waters? Because it must have been difficult people didn't know what mochi was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I've spent the last 11 years saying, oh, hi, and what is mochi? Oh, mochi's a soft, sweet dough wrapped around a ball of ice cream. Like, that's literally all I've said the last 11 years. So it's been really nice that people are starting to know the product and be familiar with it. But with food, it's just about trying it. That's the only way I feel you can convey how something tastes, how it makes you feel. And so we just thought we just have to sample. And that's how we slowly built our following through. But you can only hit so many people in Whole Foods if you're sampling. So I think we built that market up as well by supplying it to the restaurants, because people tend to go to restaurants wanting to try new things. They're willing to order something rather than take it off the shelf. So I think we built up a market of mochi fans through the restaurants anyway. And so when we hit the shelves, we then just had to continue to grow that.
And were those, so how many restaurants were you in pre going into retail?
We were all over Europe as well. So I want to say thousands, and it's not an exaggeration.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So almost like you set it up so that when you went into retail, I generally think there's a really good balance. If you can get branded in restaurants, and that's something we're trying to do now with Manny Life, to get in these really high-end restaurants, get it branded, that when people then go into a Waitrose, they're like, I know, I've already tried it. I think you guys have done that spot on.
Yeah, there were years where we just felt like the task that we had to do was single-handedly educate the UK or Europe about mochi ice cream. So we were getting it into loads of restaurants, but it wasn't always name tagged, or actually rarely name tagged as Little Moons, because most restaurants want to create the perception that they're kind of making things themselves. And so there came a time where we realized that we were investing all this effort kind of growing mochi ice cream, but not really growing our brand. And that's when we started trying to do sort of activations like our pop-up in Selfridges and our pick and mix freezers in Whole Foods, and really getting the Little Moons brand name out there.
And how, just on the kind of, I suppose, the branding of the menu with these restaurants, how did you navigate that conversation to like either the chefs and said like, it's, because I think that's a really hard conversation to have. But I think if you can, for anyone listening to this, if you can get branded in these places, it's like, it's commercial marketing. It's when you're getting sales and two, you're getting that brand awareness. How did you guys navigate that?
It's a difficult one. I think I think the more work we did on creating like an appealing brand, the easier it became. So if people like think, actually, I want people to know that this mochi is from Little Moons, it makes the conversation a lot easier. And then I guess the other is just a bit about negotiation. Like, what am I doing for you to persuade you to do that? Am I doing a cost price decrease? Am I doing a special edition? Both of those things, you know, you don't really want to do, because if you're just doing a special edition for every restaurant, you're going to sort of tie yourself up. So it's all a negotiation, really.
No, I think that's interesting, and that's something we need to work on at Moneylife, is like, how can we maximize these partnerships? Because I think once you get them there, they can really pour gasoline on your growth, really. So then what I want to talk about now is this, as you've gone on to build the brand, is what do you think of the little things Little Moons do that people don't see, but that you think makes a really big impact? So for example, I interviewed Lucky Saint the other week. They were talking about this devil in the detail thing of being obsessed with like the tiny things. I'd love to know kind of what you guys do at Little Moons, in the little things Little Moons do that make an outstanding brand, I suppose.
I think the number one thing for us is always taste. I think you need an incredible product, and then the only job that you have to do is get people to sample it. And once they've tried it, hopefully quite a lot of them will buy it again. So for most of our kind of history, we've spent a lot of time just developing products to be as good as they can be. For example, our vegan tropical flavor took quite a long time to develop. We didn't really want to launch a vegan flavor until it delivered and you could almost not tell that it was a dairy-free ice cream. But it took so many iterations of trying out different milk alternatives to get to that stage. And I think it's these little decisions you make in terms of your ingredients and where you source your pistachio from, for example, that kind of does make the difference. And people notice that in the taste when you eat when it really delivers. So I think that's the core thing for us. But then besides that, I think it's just about paying loads of care and attention to about all the various touch points people have with your brand. So for example, our kiosks that we have in Selfridges and Westfield, it's the face of Little Moons. So we really want a great team and great customer service and engagement when you're there. So that's really, really important focus of us, is how people interact with our team there. And it's just little things like that. They're all actually kind of part-time actresses and theatrical actors. So it means they're really engaging when it comes to customers.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's almost like the quality of contact versus quantity, because I think like you could, for example, with us, we've got loads of these mini pots which we can give out, which are fantastic, and you can do them at scale. But actually, what's also really important is doing a sampling session in store where you can really get passionate about the product. And as you said about these, hiring actresses, hiring people who can buy into that whole like ice cream from another world. You know what I mean? It's that whole thing. It's so interesting.
One of our values is also care about the little things. And so that ethos goes all the way through our business, from the movers and makers who make our mochi, because those small details behind the scenes of every single mochi, not looking quite similar, but just putting care and love into making them, to our marketing team caring about the little things, all those little details and executional bits that make it so endearing and fun. Like our summer tour, I didn't have anything to do with it. I just turned up to the launch and I was just wowed by everything, the thought and just down to the way that they have the flavor cards and the beach balls they'd commissioned, all those sort of things. I think it really does it's because of everyone caring about the little things.
And sorry, are you referencing the Monty the Moon mobile?
Yeah.
Is that like, even then the name? So I thought that's like the name, but like it's the little things, but like the alliteration in the name. It's like it's punchy, it stands out.
Yeah.
And so was, I suppose, what was the why behind that? Was that trying to increase awareness outside of London? Because obviously, if you guys have got this pick and mix in Selfridges, most people in London are going to know it. But I think for most brands listening to this, one of the hardest battles is like, how do you drive that distribution and drive the rate of sale in stores where it's not in London? What was the...
And it's hard, and I guess it was just not giving back as such, but it was nice to go to our customers for once, because we were hearing, especially in Selfridges, people plan trips into London just to come to the Little Moon store, like from Scotland, and they say, I'm just making sure you're definitely open this Saturday because I'm getting a train down from Scotland to see you. And it was just nice to sort of go into those communities and sort of on the beach over the summer. And it was just nice to engage with all of our consumers and just meet them and sort of give them stuff, merch. And because I think it was free product that we were handing out. It wasn't there for them to buy it. We were just handing out our free summer flavors. So it's really, really fun event.
No, they looked it, and the cut, like all the colors and stuff like that. It's such a vibrant brand. I think Tony Winkelmann called them like unicorn balls. I thought that's like this, I think that is just genius. It's just like this sort of like irreverent brand and really, really fun. And I think especially when we're living in like some things get so serious, it's like a little moment of escapism. Absolutely. Those mochi balls. So where I want to go to next, and I'd probably get, if I didn't ask about this, I'd probably get murdered, but maybe not. That's probably a bit too severe. But in terms of TikTok, so this TikTok thing went absolutely berserk, and I kind of want to know, was that set up? Like, how did that all unfold, or was it just completely?
It was completely organic. Like, it wasn't something we planned at all. We'd been on TikTok. We'd had an account because Charlie, he started with us as an intern. She had the idea. She came to us and said, oh, because there was a few platforms that we joined, but TikTok was the one that really sort of hit it off. And she set up an account and she was like having fun posting it. And all of our team were looking at them, just sort of having a laugh in the office, really, if nothing else. And then, so she'd been doing it for a year before it really took, like before we went viral. And it was just during a team meeting, she sort of mentioned, oh, we're getting quite a lot of views on our hashtag. And we were like, oh, really? Like, 10,000 or something. And we were just like, oh, that's great, but didn't really think anything of it. And then 10,000 became 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, within a couple of days, it was 10 million, 20 million. And that was when we were like, holy smokes, like, what's going on with this? And then we just sort of took on a life of itself. And then because we are a relatively small factory, we had this big factory, but we hadn't built up the capacity yet, because we were just going to add on like different lines as we needed it, and grew with our plan. And so the scarcity of product, I think, just drove people to look for it more, a bit like toilet paper. If you think it's going to run out, everyone's looking for it, and it just sort of took on a life of its own.
Yeah, it wasn't planned, but we didn't plan to be kind of out of stock everywhere, but it kind of drove even more interest in the product. So we kind of played it well, kind of accidentally, I would say.
Well, it's that whole thing. It's like, it's almost a bit like, there's two things. It's a bit like probably Pokemon Go, like people trying to find the mochi ice cream. And there's that whole scarcity thing. Scarcity drives more intrigue, and it drives obviously sales as well. So how did you, like, now from that serendipitous moment, like how do you now leverage TikTok? Are you more strategic about it now to use it as a weapon to like drive sales in retailers, or did you still kind of let it kind of do its own thing, if that makes sense?
I think the TikTok moment was just a really lucky moment in time where the whole nation was kind of in lockdown, and the only thing you could do was kind of go to a grocery store. So having an interesting product that people wanted to speak about was just the perfect timing, because there was literally, you're not competing against any other thing like going to the pub or going out with your mates. It's like, I still want to film something and create content, and this was like a really easy piece of content to create. Like, anyone can get involved. I don't think you can kind of almost replicate it, or I don't have the secret recipe for replicating it again. I think it was just like right time, right place, right product, kind of a nice brand that people could get behind. But I think now we kind of we're still engaged with our TikTok audience, but we're just looking at kind of bringing us out of being a TikTok brand and getting out there. So we've done an out of home campaign, we've done a TV campaign. It's really important for us to know that for people to know that we're not just like a TikTok fad of 2021. We're actually here to stay and continue to grow the category.
Yeah, I love that, because you don't want that tag, the TikTok tag. Getting away from that is so important, I think. And with the out of home campaign, what's that? How's that kind of? What are the messages you're trying to convey with that?
Well, I guess we just wanted to get across that we're a brand that's like serious about kind of getting out there and doing things a bit differently. So we did a mural in Camden, which I think is still up, which like looks amazing. We just painted this building like pink, and I just think it just looks great. And took just big sites really that kind of the tagline was ice cream from another world, and it was really about kind of introducing Little Moons to an audience outside of TikTok. You know, kind of our regular consumer tends to be older than the TikTok audience, and so the out of home campaign was really to sort of drive awareness with people outside of that community.
Amazing. Now we're kind of always finish these interviews with a bit of a quick fire round. I think I want to go back to sort of the brother and sister theme. It's kind of central in this. I do think it's so interesting. I haven't interviewed anyone yet with a brother and sister relationship who's had this just conglomerate success like you guys. So I suppose, Howard, first, what is one piece of advice you'd give to Viv for the kind of the next 3 years as you continue to scale up Little Moons?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say that she needs to give herself more of a break and switch off better. I think she's always on, and I think that can stress you out too much. So take more breaks.
I live with chronic anxiety.
So are you? So do you really find it hard to have that balance, Viv? Is that what that is?
Yeah, no, I can't switch off. I find it really hard to sleep at night. It's just a lot going on. It was better before this last 18 months, but the business has just been hit by loads and loads of things. Macro, most of it was macro issues, but it still becomes your own issue, right? Like if there's a cardboard shortage, it's still up to you to try and fix it, even though it's not your fault. But yes, I do need to try and switch off. Thanks, Howard. Take next month off.
And then Viv, you probably know what's exactly coming next, but what would be the one piece of advice you'd give to Howard for the next 3 years on the Little Moons journey?
I think it's great that he has decided, he's learned to do the 80-20 rule, because he overthinks as well, so he's constantly on too. So I guess it's just that, and just continuing to, I don't know, it's really nice watching Howard grow as a leader and as a person, as my brother as well. So it's just, it's good to see him do that.
Amazing. And I kind of find a couple of questions. So this question I ask all guests, it's quite interesting lens, but it's what is the one question you believe food and drink founders aren't asking themselves enough, that if they did would pour gasoline on their growth?
Is what you're doing exactly what the consumer wants, is looking for? Or because sometimes I just think, myself included, we just get so insular in the way that we're thinking. We've got to sometimes stop and then really look at the landscape and think, are we doing the right thing?
So on that, like I've got this thing about the brand bubble. And it's like we all live. So I live in a Money Life brand bubble. You live in the Little Moons brand bubble, where it's like you become so engrossed in your own brand that you're walking around with almost like these blinkers on. And I think there's a real power in stepping out of that brand bubble. And the way you can do that through either like going to visit customers in store, doing, with any new NPD, like actually giving it to the consumer, like not making just that decision internally. So I think you're so right. You can get so engrossed in your own thinking of things. It can sometimes like cloud decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you definitely have. So true. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, like we spend time agonizing over where we put a logo on our pack, or what font we use, and the reality is most consumers won't even notice the change or care. So you've got to remember that actually for you, your brand is everything. But for most consumers with like a million other distractions in the world, it's like 0.1% of their attention or headspace. So you kind of have to keep that in your mind.
Now, so your final question. So as I said, pre us going live on this, is I've got this Hungry WhatsApp group, and I ask, have you guys got any questions for Little Moons? And one of the recurring questions that came up from listeners and founders is, what were the biggest learnings you took from the first factory, which then transpired into building the second factory, or the factory you're in now, Viv?
How much time do you have?
I've actually got, it's Friday afternoon. We probably clock off for the pub. But I mean, maybe you could distill it into 3 big biggies would be helpful.
Could write you a novel. Get a professional team on board. It's worth spending that money, because you want to find out where you think your bottlenecks are going to be. Like I didn't do that plan the first time around, believe it or not. I'm not afraid to share it. Like we didn't have a background in food, but then you just sort of see what the processes are a bit slower. I mean, it sounds like the first factory was awful. It wasn't, but it was. I really did learn. In the second factory, you do have to make sure that you don't have any production bottlenecks in certain areres. What else?
Cash management was a massive.
Oh yeah.
The first one.
Oh my God, I didn't know asset financing worked. So we didn't have that. So everything was just really on a shoestring. With the second factory, we got proper financing. We calculated our cash flow much better. Also, never rely on UK power networks. If you're it took them, I want to say 8 months to connect our electricity. And I thought, I've got plenty of time. They'll definitely do it within 8 months. And we had a factory ready to go and no power, not enough power to it. And so each day it was just costing us so much money. And I thought I was going to bankrupt ourselves because of this issue. So absolutely, just make sure that you do have UK power networks on site way before you need them.
It's people probably listening to this and thinking like, I'm definitely going to outsource. But I suppose, out of curiosity, how come you guys never decided? How come you guys always wanted to do the sort of to keep it in house and build your factory? What was the?
I didn't have the money. We didn't have the money to pay for a project manager, because we didn't have any external investment. I think a lot of businesses can have raise funds before. And so we just did everything on a shoestring, which is why we don't currently have any external investors, because we did everything.
And I think you're asking about why we chose to produce ourselves, right?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. Because I think from what you've said there, that long, as you said, Viv, it's like you could write a novel and that would probably dissuade people from ever set up a factory. But I think I'm really curious as to why you guys decided to do it yourselves.
Yeah, at the beginning, I think because of our kind of background with our parents sort of making their own food and running a factory, it was almost not a consideration to get someone else to make it. And secondly, there was no one really out there who was able to make it at the time. It's quite a sort of unique product to make. And so I don't think we would have been able to find a third-party manufacturer, even if we tried. We got a lot of advice from business leaders like through the years, where they just said, okay, our advice to you is don't produce yourself, let someone else do it. And we're like, thanks for that advice. It's a bit too late for us, but like, cheers.
It was just, there are no other mochi makers out there. So there was no other factory for us to go to. But I think if you are doing a drinks company, obviously there's canning businesses, which are huge that can help you, or there's, sports bar, nutritional bars, there's people that can make that for you. So we didn't feel like we had a choice. We had to go into it.
But in hindsight, I think that it's just that even though there were a few years of like insane pain making your own product, I think it's ended up a real like strength of the brand, because it allows you to innovate really quickly, and just no one will care as much about your product as you do. So, you have full control over the quality and how it's made. And I think, where I was used to be jealous of other brands that could outsource it, I can also see the pain points there where, you fall out with your manufacturers and all sorts of things. So, it was a decision that it wasn't really a decision. It was kind of a given at the beginning. And I'm just really glad that we went down that route now.
It's so interesting. As I was saying, this podcast is now sponsored by a brand called Momo Kombucha. A lovely guy called Josh, who's making it in a small unit in Vauxhall, right by our office. And he was saying he would never keeping that quality is tantamount to everything. And I think you guys are the prime example of that. If you can keep it in-house, you have that quality, and you actually, even though it's like a bit of a slog to begin with, eventually you have more speed because you can just make, you know, fire out MPD or try new products and variants.
I think another consideration is, what value are you adding by making it yourself? And I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but like if you're making a tea product and you can source great tea leaves, but you're not adding any particular value by bagging it yourself, just get someone else to bag it for you. You know, what value are you adding in that part of the process? Because if you really are, then make it yourself. If you can't, then don't, because, you know, if it's just your recipe, then someone can make that up for you. But you know what I mean? Like for us, the process is the value add that we are adding to it that no one else has the know-how of.
Yeah, and it's like it's a defense against competition. Like it's your intellectual property, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Final question, and really interested for you kind of to answer this both separately. But what do you think Little Moons will look like in 5 years' time?
Where I want it to look like is global. I'd like everyone around the world to have tried Little Moons, in Asia, in Australia, all over Europe, which, you know, that's where I want to see Little Moons in 5 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to be really boring here and give us some answer, but we just changed our kind of mission to be from being Europe's favorite mochi brand to being the world's favorite mochi brand. So we kind of just want to kind of replicate the success we've had in the UK in our international markets and just sort of see how far we can take this.
I love it. I think that's the perfect thing to end on. It's like, if you're dreaming big, dream bigger. You don't need Europe. You need the universe next. I absolutely love that. Howard, Viv, that was an absolute pleasure. Learnt bucket loads, and I know listeners will absolutely love this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having
Cheers,
us.
Dan.